Can you hear me?
Yeah, I was trying to go through her slides. There's two that aren't showing, and I think they're the two that have all the logos. Um, so that's what I was. Do you see the record button? Because I can't see it on my screen. I
We are recording.
Perfect.
Okay, if we're ready. Good evening, and on behalf of the Center for Autism and Related Disabilities, CARD, and the Learning Academy, TLA, at the University of South Florida, welcome to the Eye of the Beholder, our Obsessions Equal Opportunities webinar and listening session with Dr. Morénike Giwa Onaiwu. I'm Dr. Beth Boone, Executive Director of CARD and TLA. It is my great pleasure to introduce our guest speaker. Dr. Morénike Giwa Onaiwu is a global self-advocate, educator, and a disabled person of color in a neurodiverse, multicultural, serodifferent family. A prolific writer, public speaker, and social scientist activist whose work focuses on meaningful community involvement, human rights, intersectional justice, and inclusion, Morénike is a humanities scholar at Rice University's Center for the Study of Women, Gender, and Sexuality, and a member of several executive boards. Diagnosed as autistic in adulthood shortly after their children's autism diagnoses, Morénike has been an invited speaker at the United Nations, the White House, and numerous peer-reviewed international conferences. Publications include Sincerely Your Autistic Child, What People on the Autism Spectrum Wish Their Parents Knew About Growing Up, Acceptance and Identity from Beacon Press, All the Weight of Our Dreams on Living Racialized Autism, and the forthcoming Neurodiversity in Noir, a collection of Black neurodiverse voices from Jessica Kingsley Publishing. Learn more at morenikego.com. That's morenikego.com and at morenikego on social media. Along the way, if you have comments, please put them in the chat and questions can go in the Q&A section. There will also be times after the presentation that microphones will be live for sharing of stories and ideas. Dr. Onaiwu, welcome, and we now invite you to begin.
Thank you so much. And I did notice that there was a chat that there's an individual having some trouble hearing. So I'm not sure how they reach out for any technical assistance, but if someone could assist with that or maybe demonstrate how we utilize the live captioning if anyone needs that. So, hi everyone. I'm just really grateful to be here with you all, and I'm fortunate that the staff will be helping me to share the slides so that I can concentrate on talking to you and looking at my notes and stimming. So, as you have been told, I'm Morénike, and I'm really grateful to be having this opportunity. I've been working with CARD for a little while on various different endeavors that they're doing. And so I'm not certain how much familiarity everyone present has with CARD, the Center for Autism and Related Disabilities, but toward the latter part of what we're doing, you'll be able to get more information and hopefully share. So this presentation is called Eye of the Beholder, Our Obsessions, Equal Opportunities. Next slide, please. So as a disclaimer, I am not an employee of CARD, but I am affiliated with CARD. I've been working with them. I am a humanities scholar for Rice University and involved in a number of different other endeavors. I wanted to give you all, just kind of let you all know there's a content warning. I'm going to be sharing some information about some people you might have heard of, some that you have not, and also some concepts. Some of them might be a little bit heavy. Most are not. So if you are watching this with a little one, for the most part, this is okay. I'll try to maybe cue you if there's something that might be challenging because there are a few difficult situations that are mentioned here. But I also want to share that if you have need of image descriptions, because although I don't fully think in pictures like Temple Grandin, I somewhat do. So my presentations are very image heavy. There's not a whole lot of text. So if you are a person who uses a screen reader and you need the image descriptions later, please email me. You'll have my contact information and I'll be happy to get that to you, as well as any attribution for any of the information that I've provided to you. Thank you very much. It seems that there's still someone having difficulty hearing. So what I'm going to do, I'm hoping that everyone can hear. If there's anyone who cannot hear, please maybe type, other than Raquel, please type it in the chat, and we can try to help you. Next slide, please. So I like to start out all of my presentations with what I call my 5 C's of accessibility, because it's important that we know that we can be comfortable in this setting. And so my first C is for comfort. I want you to be comfortable. So I've got a stimming device, my little slinky. I've got another one in my lap if this fails me. So if you need to, have a little snack, I've got some water and some snacks here, or whatever it is that you need. If you need to stim or move, I want you to be comfortable, because the more comfortable that you are, the more you'll be able to take in this information. My next C is for connect. And in a couple of slides, I'm going to give you some hashtags and some social media handles if you want to share anything now or later with someone else who isn't here. This presentation will also be recorded, and you'll be able to connect and share the information that way. I also want you to connect in terms of the way that you think and you process. So if you hear an acronym or a term you don't understand, maybe jot it down, maybe pull it up on your phone, just so that you have understanding. Also ask questions. Again, we'll have the Q&A and the chat feature, and then there's going to be an opportunity for you all to share at length, and we really, really want to hear from you. My other C's are for connect. Consider. Please be considerate of everyone here. We all have different backgrounds. We have different experiences. We have different opinions, and it's okay to be different. In fact, it's beautiful to be different. So be respectful of other perspectives. And then my last 2 C's are for challenge and commit. I want to challenge you that if some of this is review, then that's good. I see that as reinforcement. If some of it is new and unfamiliar, I just ask that you keep an open mind and take it in. And I want you to commit yourself to continuing to do whatever it is that you do in your life to make for a more equitable and fair world. Whether you are a person who's on the autism spectrum, or a parent, you're a professional, you're an ally in some way, we need one another to make this world better. And so I want you, whatever it is that you do, are you a student? Are you a person who's really, involved in digital media or whatever? Who are you talking to? Who can you educate? Who can you share with and help? Keep doing what you're doing, because you're awesome. Next slide, please. So we are in our new virtual world where we do a lot of things virtually. So you might have a fur baby hanging out. You might have a real baby hanging out. You might be the baby. But again, just be comfortable and be present with us. And thank you for, in this virtual setting, for accommodating us. And so the next slide, unfortunately, we were having some difficulty pulling it up, but it's a slide where I just wanted to share the social media information. It's not this one. I'll talk about this one in just a second. But there was a slide where I wanted to share if you're not familiar with CARD, with their social media, you can reach them at CARD-USF, and they are on various types. They're on Facebook. They've got a blog, they've got a website. And so we'll share some more information about that for you as well. They have groups that meet in English and in Spanish, and a whole lot of resources. So we definitely encourage you to check them out. Next slide, please. And if you are following the chat, you'll see that the URL for CARD's website has been placed in there as well. So quickly, I'm going to be talking about our obsessions equals opportunities. And so what it is it an obsession, or is it an opportunity, or is it both? It's all in the eye of the beholder. And what prompted this is some years ago, I think about when I was reading through the DSM-4 and later the DSM-5, reading about the different characteristics of autism. And so one of the characteristics they have is highly restricted, fixated interests that are abnormal in intensity and focus. And they talk about our rituals and our deficits in communication. I mean, like, they just make you want to just stab yourself in their heart the way they talk about you. All totally negative, no neutral way of describing. But yes, it is true that many of us have really intense, things that we get really intense and passionate about. Kasiana Asasamasu, who is an autistic activist and is actually the person who coined the term neurodivergent, calls what they call obsessions and special interests and passions deep love. that we're all about going big or going home. When we do something, we do it. When we like something, we like it. If we like that kind of food, we might eat it every day, all day. If we like a certain type of shoes, we might not want to ever wear another type of shoes. Parents, this can be sometimes difficult if that brand of food or shoes stops selling or whatever. But what I'm sharing with is that, yes, these intense interests or special interests or whatever person calls them, we are passionate about things. And in some cases, these things that we're passionate about are just things that are going to be hobbies or of interest to us. However, they can be used in so many important ways. They can be used to connect with other people. They can be used to help with learning and socializing. They can be used maybe to pursue a career. It has happened for me. So I want to encourage you, whoever you are, siblings, partners, parents, yourself, don't suppress that special interest. And we're going to talk about why in this presentation. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to talk a whole lot about me right now. I'll talk about myself a little later, but I just wanted to share with you. You've heard some things from my bio. I just want to let you all know that I am a person on the autism spectrum. I also have children who are on the autism spectrum and children who are not. And so my parents are immigrants from West Africa. So I'm bicultural. I grew up with different languages in my home and religions. So I'm, a birth and adoptive parent. And I wear a lot of hats, and so I can identify with a lot, not with everything. But I just wanted to let you all know that, you've got a partner. I'm not coming to you, talking down to you. We're together. I'm talking with you. Next slide, please. So got 52 minutes, but we got this, y'all. So the next slide is showing an image of a brain, and it's talking about neurodiversity. And you might know what the concept of neurodiversity is, but because I'm not certain whether you do or not, I just would like to share a bit about it. So the concept of biodiversity is talking about the fact that there's different forms of life, the heterogeneity of life. And that's what actually allows our planet and, and the different species on it and so forth to thrive. And so Judy Singer came up with the term when writing her thesis many years ago, neurodiversity. And she was talking about the different types of brains, because she was thinking about how there's racial diversity and there's gender diversity and there's age diversity. There's all types of, diversity. People are different. And every single human being has a different brain. So even people who are considered quote unquote neurotypical still have different brains from one another. Dr. Boone's brain is different than, maybe one of her colleagues' brains and so on. But there are certain types of ways of thinking and processing and communication that are more common and that are more standard. And so though the other types aren't wrong, they're in the minority. So an example that doesn't have anything to do with brains, but just to illustrate it, right-handedness. About 90% of the population, myself included, are right-handed people. About 10% are left. Well, it's actually a little less than 10 because there are some people who are ambidextrous, but there's some research that a lot of people who are ambidextrous might be left-hand dominant. But let's say less than 10% of the population or so is left-handed. Now, there is nothing wrong with being left-handed, but it is more common. And I'm an ex-centennial, so if you grew up like me in the 80s, they had some desks where you had just a half of a desk, right? And it just had like a part for writing. Now, if you're right-handed, that was great. But if you're left-handed, you didn't even have the desk on your side of the room. And most classrooms had at most one left-handed desk. Well, we know that, a person who's left-handed needs to be accommodated and needs to have the same respect. Similarly, there are a lot of people whose brains are different from one another, but they're a little bit more standard than those of us who kind of deviate from the mean. And neurodiversity has to do with autism, but not just autism, ADHD, dyslexia, giftedness, dyscalculia, intellectual disability, all types of different things, all types of different flavors of brains. And the neurodiversity paradigm says that just like we have different racial groups, different languages, different political systems, and unfortunately there's a hierarchy, right, in society of which ones are more, prominent or whatever. There's similarly that type of hierarchy in brains. There shouldn't be, but there's a perception that the type that's more neurotypical is the better way and everything else kind of deviates from that. And so I want you to think about that because again, autism falls into that. Even the terms that are used, again, if we were to read through DSM-4 and 5, express that this is a condition, a way of being that's seen in a negative way. The advice that parents are given to grieve their child as if their child's dead when they get this diagnosis is another example of how we see it. Even the name, autism spectrum disorder, it's telling you that you have a disorder, you're disordered. not ordered right. And next slide, please. And so I want to turn things around because the world has a way of seeing things one way, but things can be seen in another way. And I want to talk about the concept of intersectionality briefly, which was a term coined by Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw. Next slide, please. And so intersectionality is talking about, oh no, go back one more. Yes, that one. Intersectionality is a concept where you have different identities, and every single human being has different identities, right? And they're all kind of layered upon one another. But with intersectionality, you have identities that are more marginalized or oppressed in society. And so they're kind of connecting with one another and kind of interacting and weaving, and you can't really separate them from one another. And so there's this can impact our lives in a number of ways. It's basically, how does our privilege and our marginalization shift back and forth depending on the circumstances? And every single human being has some kind of privilege, and every single human being has some kind of marginalization. Some people have more of each or less, but there is no person who has only privilege. So in a society where where neurotypicality is the norm, it is a marginalization to be autistic or have some other type of neural minority. In a society where heterosexuality is common, someone whose sexuality is different is seen as that, and so on. So it just varies depending on the circumstances. However, depending on where you are, what's a minority in one place is not in another. When I go to West Africa, I'm a person of color, but I look like everyone else there. I'm not a racial minority there. I might be an ethnic minority in certain places, but not racial. I could be here with a colleague, and so I'm, Black, non-binary woman on the spectrum. I could be here with a white, heterosexual, male, cisgender colleague, but if that person's non-speaking most of the time and they type to communicate, whereas maybe half the time I speak to communicate, I could have a lot more privilege than that person, regardless of his skin tone, because the fact that I can converse in a more conventional way gives me opportunities that he does not have, which is unfair to him. Next slide, please. So if you are a person who's a neural minority, and in this case, if we're talking about autism, you're strange. Maybe strange in a kind of a cool way, like Dr. Strange, where people kind of like you, but you're still strange. People can't really relate to you. Next slide, please. And so unfortunately, society requires you to wear a mask a lot of times. And so this hides the real you. Instead, you're presenting a more acceptable self. And some of the ways that people do that are some of the things that they're really into, that they like, their interests or their hobbies. They're told, don't talk about that. Everybody's gonna think that's weird. Or don't monopolize the conversation talking about XX, or that's childish. Only talk about that at home. Or, you'll never get a date if everybody knows that you're into this still, or whatever. So people have things that they're really into that they would love to talk about and do and be involved in. And those are things that are, you are shunned. Next slide, please. And unfortunately, when that happens, that blocks true connection. Because yes, you can parrot some social, appropriate terms. How are you? I am fine. But if you can't talk about the thing that brings you the most joy, that you spend the most time on, then how are you really connecting? You're not, unfortunately. And so next slide, please. So I want you to consider the possibility, whether you're a parent, a professional, whether you're an autistic person yourself, what if it didn't have to be like that? What if you could lean in and connect regardless of the fact that the person's interest is different than yours, or it's something that you feel is a little atypical? Fortunately, next slide, please. Another way does exist. And so we're going to talk about a few of these, and I might have to cut some of them down just to make sure that we have enough time. But basically, I want to share some case studies with you, real life people who have their obsessions have become opportunities for them. Some are historical, some are still living. And so I want you to consider the fact that you don't have to change who you are. You don't have to be into, humpback whales or whatever the other person is. And they shouldn't have to suppress the fact that they like humpback whales. But how can we find a way where they can still connect? And to do so requires an open mind, and not just on that person's behalf, but a lot on that behalf of society. Next slide, please. So I'm going to tell you about a few people. Some I know, some I don't. This is one that I know. This image reminds me of Dr. Nick Walker. Dr. Nick Walker grew up in a home and so I mentioned parents, if you have any little ones nearby, I'm going to share some things about that are a little difficult. Nick Walker had a difficult upbringing. There were some challenges in the home in terms of emotional and physical mistreatment. On top of that, Nick was also different, being disabled, and so lived in a neighborhood where there were a lot of bullies, people would fight, and Nick was constantly getting hurt. And so Nick was just frustrated and different. People would tease Nick for being different, for stimming, or for talking differently, and so on. And so this happened for a while. And then one day, when Nick was about in early middle school, Nick decided, you know what? If people are going to be fighting me all the time and beating me up, I might as well at least learn how to fight back. I mean, I should at least give them a little bit of a challenge instead of just letting them pummel me with their face. So Nick wasn't sure what to do. How do you learn how to fight if you've never fought? So there was a YMCA in the neighborhood, and Nick walked into the YMCA, and they happened to have Aikido classes that were, for students, a lower price. And so Nick had never done any type of martial arts or had done really any kind of sports, but walking in, the people said, hey, take off your shoes, turn this way, then do this. And Nick was like, oh, wow, they're telling me what to do. They're not expecting that I know. That was refreshing. So whether you were new to Aikido, whether you had been there a million years, everyone did the same thing. You take off your shoes, you bowed a certain way, they had instructions, and then you were able to move your body and do all of these different things and learn tasks and learn them individually and as a team. Nick loved Aikido, threw themselves into Aikido and became a sensei, got a black belt, became a sensei, actually opened a dojo. And through doing this, Nick finally found, so aside from the fact that Aikido does ward off bullies, as Nick found out, even people who are bigger and heftier than you, if you're swift, they'll leave you alone. But aside from that, it gave Nick something to talk about, something to be interested in, something to show people and train. It took this person who was a shy, withdrawn, individual who had been bullied and really didn't have any friends, to being part of a community of people of multiple ages, and something that was that Nick loved. So Nick actually finished school and went on to college. Nick, who was planning to drop out as soon as they were old enough and leave, now had a reason to want to go to college and some way to actually help pay for it. And so Nick actually continued this, and in addition to Aikido, Nick started thinking that there was a lot of therapeutic gain in movement and having sensory input in a way that's socially acceptable but still free, like Aikido. And so Nick actually got into a lot of the contemplative and therapeutic arts, and and actually again went to graduate school and has done some research in this area, in an area that there's not a whole lot of research in, and certainly not by autistic researchers. So this passion, I don't want to get hit, let me find out a way to do this thing, focusing on that, where some people might have said, why don't you learn how to be more social? Or why don't you hide from the bullies, take a different way home or whatever? Nick leaned into this desire, which was to learn Aikido, and it transformed Nick's life. Next slide, please. Sir Anthony Hopkins is someone that you all may or may not know, an amazing actor. Some of you might know films such as Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal Lecter, and all kinds of things, Amistad. So Anthony Hopkins was bullied a lot growing up too. A lot of people thought Anthony was weird and strange. And again, another person whose autism was diagnosed later in life. But Anthony had this capacity that people thought was odd. So when people would tease and make fun of, Anthony would sit back and kind of look at the person and think, what's going on with them, that they're worried about me, that they're bothering me, that they're teasing me. What's going on? Anthony was interested in getting inside their head, figuring out what made them tick, thinking, what's this person's deal? Are they trying to distract from the work that they don't know how to do? Or are they, just a class clown? Or are they just mean-spirited? And I always wanted to figure out why people would do things and what was motivating them, to the point where he started to mimic them when he would get home. He would mimic their voices, he would mimic their mannerisms. And he found that he had a great memory for these types of things and a great ability to kind of figure out what made somebody tick and behave in a certain way. And soon he learned that he could project a type of bravado that stopped people from beating him up, that his body language and certain things like that would send a message, dude, if you mess with me, you're in trouble, even if that wasn't the case. And so this is something that helped, propel Anthony into acting. Anthony's an amazing actor. So there's a scene in the movie Amistad. There's like a courtroom scene that's like this very, very, climatic scene. In one reading, at one take and one reading, just seeing it for the first time, Anthony delivered this. And so some of the things that were criticized about the stereotypy and the repetitiveness and repeating, echolalia is a strength if you're an actor. And it's definitely a strength for Sir Anthony Hopkins. So leaning into this strength. Thank you so much, Liz. Wow, won an Oscar for Best Actor. See, that's what I'm talking about. What if Anthony's parents had said, dude, stop repeating everything people say. Stop imitating what people do. That's so weird. You're such a weirdo. Then this wouldn't be an Oscar award-winning actor that has inspired many people around the world. Next slide, please. I think most of you are familiar with our little hero, Greta, who was diagnosed as being on the autism spectrum some years ago as a teenager, and has really, really revolutionized climate change, brought a lot of attention to the global movement for climate change to youth activists all over the world. And so Greta learned in school, like most people do, a little bit about the global warming and things that were going on, and was really confused about why her parents were doing certain things. And like, if this is destroying the environment, or if this is increasing our carbon footprint, or if this is bad, why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? At one point, Greta's mom actually had a job that required a lot of traveling, and so Greta was so disturbed, like calculating how much fossil fuel her mother was using to travel to do all these things, or eating meat, how much it was, what it was doing to the environment, just so many things. Greta wanted the family to make changes to recycle and to upcycle and, conserve and all of these things. And the family was like Greta was so worried about this, and the family was like, okay, she's right. I mean, we are being kind of hypocritical. And they started, but that wasn't enough. And Greta was like, okay, my family's making this change, but what about the rest of the world? And Greta lost weight, got depressed, grades dropped, hair started falling out, couldn't think about it anymore. How am I supposed to do my homework, chill, have fun online, play with my friends when they're destroying the world? And so Greta's parents didn't, tell her, stop being so dramatic. Who cares? Mind your own business. You won't be alive by the time this happens anyway. No, they allowed her to speak her mind. And Greta started her very famous school strikes, and it has spread across the world. And Greta has been an inspiration to so many people. I was fortunate enough a year and a half ago to be able to go to a screening of her documentary and meet the producers who had been following her around for a couple of years. And Greta is still very much autistic, still likes to wear her hair a certain way, eat certain things. It doesn't matter whether you're, a 5-year-old, or you might be, an adult with graduate degree and whatnot, like myself. Some of those qualities that might be seen as more youthful qualities or whatever, that give us a sense of peace or control, are still there. But Greta has challenges, but also has strengths and leans into them, and considers being autistic a superpower, because it allows her to focus on what she feels is important and not ignore those things. And we're all better for that, because our house is on fire and we do need to make these changes. Next slide, please. Temple Grandin has transformed the agricultural industry. And Temple was diagnosed as autistic at a young age, and Temple's mother was actually advised to put her in an institution. There's a lot of people who talk about the autism tsunami and why don't we see older autistics? That's because they were diagnosed with infantile schizophrenia or atypical schizophrenia, and they were shoved away in institutions where they remained for the rest of their lives. That could have been Temple's situation. Temple's mom said, oh no, not my kid, no. And worked with her daughter, and things were challenging. Temple had a lot of anxiety. Temple had a lot of sensory issues and so forth. And so, but fortunately, Temple had an aunt who had a ranch. And so Temple watched the animals and really learned a lot from them and their mannerisms, and would groom them and was involved in all these things with the livestock. And Temple realized that that there was this device, a squeezing device, that calmed the animals down. And so this really transformed Temple's world. Temple had a teacher and then later a professor that encouraged her to kind of follow up on her ideas and her research, even though they seemed weird. Temple discovered more humane ways to slaughter cattle, ways to just all kinds of things that she came up with. She also came up with, kind of like a predecessor of the sensory vests and pressure that a lot of people wear, because she put herself in there to be comfortable. She learned a lot of things and challenged herself. And Temple Grandin is different. If you've ever seen any images of her, watched her movie, or seen her speak, Temple is not all about the frilly. Temple will have on, her jeans and her, cowboy shirt, and, doesn't mess with makeup, and will say it like it is. But being being able to follow her passions, her obsessions, led Temple to a bachelor's, master's, and graduate degree, and so many amazing achievements in science, not to mention in the field of autism, being one of the first most kind of open and outspoken people living with autism, in a time when, again, she was considered a statistic that was written off and would be nothing. But her mother let her lean into her passions, and she allowed herself to do that as well. Next slide, please. Marley Diaz was a young girl who was growing up here in the United States from an immigrant family. And she loved, her parents instilled a love of reading in her from a very young age. She loved reading. When they would read to her, and when she was old enough, she devoured books all the time, especially a lot of the classics. In the summers, her mom would go get go to the library and get the bestsellers list, and she'd, kind of run through it, and she just, all these amazing stories. But she started to see that there was a trend in stories like Old Yeller and Where the Red Fern Grows and this story and the Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer, and whether they were older or newer books, there was always a protagonist who was typically a boy. In some protagonists, there was a boy and a girl, but there were not a whole lot of people of color. And so she thought that was odd. And then she decided to start looking for books that had more young, children's books and teen books that had more characters who were involved as the hero or the lead character, who were not just little boys. And so she found several. And then so it just so happened that her family was really, really into volunteering and philanthropy. And so every year she picked a cause that she wanted to be involved in. Sometimes it was feeding the homeless or, collecting non-perishables. This one particular year, Marley decided she wanted to collect 1,000 books and have them delivered to some orphanages in Jamaica. And so she started collecting her books, and she started thinking, wow, Jamaica is a pretty ethnically diverse place. People who are Black, people who are South Asian, people who are multiracial. I don't really see books that identify that, represent these people. And so Marley became obsessed. Now, Marley's not on the spectrum. She is neurodivergent though, but she still leaned into this passion. She was like, I'm going to find 1,000 books with Black girls in them, and I'm going to send these books to Jamaica. And so she started asking everybody she knew. She hit up social media. Her parents started looking, and they discovered all of these kind of like unsung heroes, these books that people didn't know about that were amazing books. But it also called attention to the lack of ethnic diversity and gender diversity and racial diversity in a lot of children's literature. And so she actually inspired the creation of some books as a result. So Marley was only trying to get 1,000 books. I want to get my notes because I want to make sure I say the exact number that she got. In a few months' time, and she was only 11 when this all was going on, Marley collected more than 9,000 books. This is amazing. And she still is continuing this, has written a book herself. She's now a junior in high school, and continues to fight for the importance of having diverse, representation in literature. Following this obsession, again, her parents encouraged her, didn't stop her. And, her friends humored her when she talked about books, and she was able to follow her dreams, and she's changed so many lives. Next slide, please. So I want to give you an example, because sometimes it's not always as easy as a person discovering what they know that they like, right? We had some examples like Temple, like Greta, like Marley, of people who were like, preteen or early teen, and they, or some people were younger, like, Anthony Hamilton. But you don't want to wait until a person is that age to start building those connections, right? You want to build a connection as young as possible, when your child's little. And with neurotypical children, that's often a lot easier to do. When your child is neurodivergent, particularly on the spectrum, it might be a little harder to figure out, okay, they're into this, but how can I get them to connect with me? They love trains, or they love painting, finger painting, or they love doing this, but they do it alone. How can I find a way to kind of get in, get involved? And so one dad named Earl Wright did just this. His little boy was diagnosed as autistic when he was 2. And his little boy, Sean, didn't speak a lot. He was mostly non-speaking. He did script though. And so, and so he found that his son would watch a show or like a movie or whatever, or when he would do story time, he would read to his son at night. His son would like script back the different things that he said. Now, what the professionals told him is, oh, that's not spontaneous speech. That's not communication. Ignore it. You want him to say spontaneous speech, like, I want a ball. You don't want him just spouting out all these things. He's like, but he talks. No, that's not talking. That's not communicating. That's just echolalia. He was really disappointed because that was the only type of speaking his child did. But he didn't understand how this is not communication. His son seemed so into it. So then he started, realizing, you know what, if my son likes this stuff, why don't I like it? Why don't I get into it? And maybe we'll watch it, I'm watching it with him, or I put it on for him and I go run errands, or I'm, cleaning up or whatever, but why don't I kind of get with him? And so he did. And so they have a routine that they started to do. And I unfortunately don't have all of the words memorized. I have about half, and I'm gonna have to read. But one of the very first scenes that they did, and now they script all kinds of different movie and book things to each other. is that they do the scene from The Incredibles 2 with the "Where is my super suit" scene. So I'm going to do it because I love watching. There's a clip on social media of so cute of Sean and his dad doing it back and forth. And so I'm going to do it. And so there's a character called Lucius, which is the husband. And there's a character named Honey, his wife. Honey, where's my super suit? What? Where is my super suit? I put it away. Where? Why do you need to know? I need it. Don't you think about running off doing no dairy do? We've been planning this dinner for 2 months. The public is in danger. My evening is in danger. You tell me where my suit is, woman. We are talking about the greater good. The greater good? I am your wife. I'm the greatest good you will ever get. And so they would script that scene. Yeah, I hardly had to look at minutes. They would script that scene back and forth to each other. One would be Honey, one would be Lucius. And then they started doing that with other things that Sean was into. And, and so now like Sean would run up to his dad and say, if he wanted to talk or hang out, he'd say, he'd walk up to him and be like, where's my super suit? And his dad would script back. This is his way of knowing they wanted to spend time together. And so from that non-communication has led to such a close bond between this father and son, and as well as the mother. And this has actually encouraged Sean to start using some spontaneous speech in addition to scripting, because he's so comfortable, he can challenge himself and do that. So don't let anybody tell you that your child's not communicating. If they grab your finger and they point and they bring you to something, they're communicating. Behavior is communication. So don't be afraid to jump on in there and maybe make a fool of yourself, but you're going to have fun. Next slide, please. I want to talk also about another example of a family that started this young. I want to talk about Armani Williams, who is the first African-American NASCAR, openly autistic African-American or autistic at all NASCAR driver that we know of. And Armani is young. So Armani grew up and he was diagnosed as autistic when he was young, and he loved action figures and he loved racing his little cars and lining his cars up all around the house and stuff like that. So his parents saw that he was into cars, so they buy him like pajamas with cars on them and t-shirts with cars on them and toy cars and all this kind of stuff. And then one day his dad pulled up YouTube and showed him NASCAR, and he was amazed. He had no idea cars could go that fast. He was like, oh my gosh, this is so fascinating. So from then on, he became obsessed. Like he was always looking on YouTube, finding all the videos he could find of races and watching them over and over and over and over. And he'd run through the house to see how fast he could go and time stuff. And it was just really amazing. And so his family decided, maybe we should take him to a race. But they were worried because, again, autistic people, our senses are different. Some of us are sensory seekers, some of our sensory avoiders. Sometimes it varies. And so if you have ever been to a NASCAR race or watched one, they're really loud and crowded and a lot of people. They were thinking, okay, he really likes this thing, but how can we get him to enjoy such a thing? How will he? And so they were worried, but they got his snacks and they got parked, somewhere where they could escape if they needed to. And they got his noise canceling headphones and they took him as a young boy to the races. And yes, it was a little, they had to find seats that were far away from people, but yes, he was just transformed. He just loved it. And from that moment on, that's what he knew he needed to do. And the family was concerned because a lot of people talk about how autistic people don't have the focus to drive, don't get, it's difficult for it to get, and some of us aren't the greatest drivers like myself. They were like, okay, so how can we do this? But he wanted to know all of the steps, what you need to do, how to be healthy and take care of yourself to become a NASCAR driver, what all the criteria were, and his parents supported him. And so I want to read you a quote that Armani said when he was talking about how his autism helps him as a NASCAR driver. He says, I used to watch NASCAR nonstop, and I was amazed by how fast those cars were going. I loved seeing them passing cars and that there was a winner getting a trophy at the end of the race. Being autistic is an advantage for me as a race car driver. I am able to be so focused and concentrated behind the wheel. It also allows me to be consistent, smooth, and see the big picture leading up to the race. I'm able to put all of this into good use, and it has helped me develop into a pro NASCAR driver. So this is awesome. He's able to use that intense focus and all of that people criticize us for his career. And he also spends a lot of time, he donates a lot, and he spends a lot of time fundraising and educating people about autism. Next slide, please. And so I'm gonna do this person. I don't know, skip a little faster through the other one because I also have some other content that I want to go to. These stories are so amazing, but I also want to make sure that we finish on time, that you have time for Q&A, and that we can get into the second part of this presentation. So I want to talk about the creator of Pokemon very quickly. Satoshi Tajiri. I really hope I pronounced that correctly. He loved collecting insects as a kid. His mom was a little freaked out by it, but that was his thing, right? That was a special interest. So he collected insects a lot. But the area where he lived eventually started to, gentrification happens, urbanization happens. So the area that was a little bit more rural became more and more developed, and there were less bugs to catch. And so he got into other things like video games, and he loved playing video games a whole lot. He thought it was super fun. He took his video game things apart. He skipped school a lot to go home and play video games. His parents were really, really mad at him because he was like obsessed with the video games, but it was just his thing. And then so he got his diploma, and then his parents wanted him to go to the university. He didn't want to, because he wanted to be a gamer. He wanted to make games, develop games. So he went to a 2-year college. And so he went there, and so he discovered that a lot of the games were really violent. And these are games, whether they're for adults or kids, there's blood and there's people dying. And he started thinking about how distraught he would have been as a 5-year-old to play a game where you're shooting someone and there's blood and they're dying. And he's like, why does everyone have to die and fall off cliffs and all this kind of stuff? And he didn't understand that. And then he also looked around and he saw that he loved playing video games, but he didn't start till he was a teen. When he was little, he was running around collecting bugs. All the little children he saw were always playing video games. They had handheld games. They were on their parents' smartphones. He was like, dang, kids don't play anymore. They don't go outside and just play. They don't know anything about bugs. It's not fun. So he started thinking, what if I could combine my interest in bugs and video games to not be violent? And he came up with the whole concept of Pokemon. If you've ever played Pokemon characters faint. They don't die. And then he has like the whole Pokemon Go, and he like created these evolutions of the characters to where they're not necessarily insect-like, although some are, but they've got this cool, creative, colorful way of being. And so, he works long hours. So he might work a full day and then sleep the whole next day. He doesn't work like a 9 to 5. He's not the most social dude. He doesn't go to award shows. He sends his staff out to a lot of stuff, but he gets his head in the game and he loves it. That's what he's doing. That's what he does to this day. And then, so the next slide is Bobby Fischer. I'm not going to be able to spend a lot of time on him because we're running low on time, but I'm just going to say quickly, he was a US as well as a world champion. Since the time he was young, he played chess and he was great at it. And so this slide, I want to talk about some parenting research. So as a mother, I think about the fact that, so if people want to be parents, so there's a lot of thought, a lot of people talk about they are concerned about when their autistic children become older because we're not as mature as everyone else, and how we'll be able to care for a child or how we'll be able to take care of ourselves, even though there's services and there's resources and there's ways to do things. Like my husband is a huge help. He's the one that cooks. He's the one that pays bills because every light and water and gas would get cut off if I had to keep up with those things. We have our strengths and our weaknesses. We're a team, and there's things that I'm great at with regard to our kids and our homes and things that he's great at. And so a lot of people are so concerned about their children because they're like, how is this person? They don't even get jokes. They're not street smart. How are they supposed to be able to handle the nuances of dating and marriage and kids and play dates and life? And so I want to share with you, there's a newer one. This is research that I have from 2016 and 18, but there was a newer one that came out earlier this year. Unfortunately, I didn't read it in enough. I read through it, I skimmed it, but I didn't read it enough to feel comfortable sharing that data, although it seems to correspond with this. But I just want to share you some of the data about the parenting research about autism, because most of the research that's out there is looking at how stressful is it to have an autistic children, how challenging. No one is looking at the fact that what happens to these autistic kids, because kids don't stay kids, right? They grow up when they become parents, be they adoptive parents, some of them, or step parents, or if they give birth. And they wanted to find out, because there's not even really a whole lot of comprehensive sex education that even addresses people who are neurodivergent. So they wanted to find out, are these people going to totally suck at parenting because of their theory of mind or whatever? So this is what they found. Autistic parents tended to have less gestational diabetes, less need for emergency C-sections. They had babies with higher APGAR scores. And they also were more likely to breastfeed. So even though there were some other challenges that autistic women had, for example, autistic parents were more, you know, in pregnancy were more likely to be taking antidepressants because autism doesn't travel alone. Usually if you have autism, there's other things that come along with it, be it, you know, gender diversity, be it other, you know, maybe psychiatric diagnosis or differences in the way that you move, you know, or what have you. But they found that here are some of the strengths that these autistic parents, most of whom identified as mothers, mentioned in the postpartum experiences, and that were also identified by the reporters. They had a heightened ability in comparison to non-autistic parents to decipher their baby's sounds and cues and respond more quickly. Think about how important that is. We can't weed through the weird body language and terms and games that y'all have, but a baby is different. If this baby comes out and you're watching, you're learning when they move like this, that means they're hungry, or when they cry like this, you can start to quickly understand their needs, and you know what it's like to need something but not be able to say it. So they were able to do this so well. They were able to develop a keen ear for what type of cry or grunt the baby, you know, need was. They had a strong intrinsic desire to be good parents. However, they didn't have this sense of cockiness that, oh, I'm going to be a good mom, because they knew that most things in life came to them through great adversity. They didn't just take anything for granted, like, oh, I can just go to a birthday party. I can just walk into a classroom. I can just go shopping and everything's going to be okay. We second guess everything. So they were more likely to attend parenting classes, read things online, watch videos, and adhere to the guidance of their OBGYN, which again is why they had less gestational diabetes, less weight gain, so forth. They recognized that they needed specialized help, and they were more likely to take extra maternal, you know, maternity time off and so forth. Um, they also insisted on breastfeeding much more than non-neurotypical mothers, despite the fact that they had exponentially more sensory discomfort with breastfeeding because of being autistic. But because they knew that it was physiologically best for the child, they were more likely to attempt and to work with a doula. They also were more likely to reach out for a support system. So non-autistic mothers, 45% of them had openly reached out to someone outside of their spouse or their like mother for help. And it's not that these non-autistic moms didn't need help. I'm sure everyone, parenting is hard, especially when you're a new parent. But there's a lot of judgment, right? There's people who are like, why don't you know that? Why can't you get that? You feel like there's some kind of parenting scale or whatever. The autistic parents, 70% of them had reached out for help. They had no shame. They were like, look, I've never been a parent before. I don't know how to do this. I need help. And so that actually assisted them. This is so wonderful. And so there's a slide I wasn't able to show that I don't have that talked about organizations and workplaces that have found how much value they get out of having autistic employees. Like special, I've never been able to pronounce this word, so I'm not even going to try. But there's a number of different organizations, both nonprofit and for-profit ones, that value neurodiverse employees and have actually initiatives involved. Next slide, please. And I'm going to see, how much time do we have? Okay, we're doing decent. Okay, so I want to talk about some of the techniques that people use to be effective in the workplace when they are neurodivergent. So I've talked about, or in school, or in your personal life, right? Because I've talked about these passions. Oh, did we not have the Benjamin Banneker slide? Could you see if I put them out of order? Okay, it is there. Okay, so let's go back to the other one. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure I didn't leave it. So no, go back, yes, to this one. So you might wonder, okay, my kid's into The Incredibles, or they're into soccer, or they're into whatever thing that you might think is really weird. So what are some ways that you can incorporate, build on this, right? So first, universal design and access is important. Places that understand that people have different abilities at different times in their lives. Tools such as voice to text, because a person may be able to comprehend well, but maybe they don't speak as well, or they don't read as fast, or what have you. Using technology, having flexibility, having things broken down. Like, for example, Armani's parents knew, okay, he loves going to NASCAR, but what if there was a particular day where his senses were just really oversensitive and they needed to get away? You got to have, again, you make sure you have your vehicle, your escape plan. You have one parent who can stay, one can leave, whatever. Flexible work arrangements. So a lot of autistic people are underemployed or unemployed. I've been fortunate in that I always pick jobs that I like, because I didn't know how I would answer. I think about when I was in high school and people were applying for jobs at like McDonald's and Burger King and Walmart. And I didn't apply to any of those places because I was scared to death. They'd ask me, why do you want to work here? And I would say, I really don't. I just need a job, because I didn't want to work there. But I started applying some other places that I actually wanted to be there, like, and I actually, the first job that I got, I was really passionate about what they were doing. It was a nonprofit, and they were raising funds for disabled police officers. And I thought that was amazing. And so I researched about, the person who the foundation was named after and some of the things they've done and the rates of officers who get injured on the job and the impact on their children. And so when I came in for the interview, I'd never had a job before. I'd only volunteered, but I was able to tell them all these different things and I was passionate and I was excited. And I'm sure I was weird and quirky, but they loved my enthusiasm. And so I've been able to do that. And I know in life, there's a lot of things like I tell my kids that you have to do. No one wants to wear a seatbelt. No one wants to pay bills. No one wants to this. There's a lot of things you have to do that you don't want to do. There's a lot of things that are boring. But if you can find something that you enjoy, that you don't have to suppress yourself, where the thing about you is good, like when you're in there, it's strength, then why not? And so use these tools. Don't be afraid. Who cares how it looks? You know what I mean? Who cares how it looks if your kid's out there with noise canceling headphones, but they're comfortable and they're happy, or they're spinning around or whatever? Who freaking cares? If they only want to wear red shirts, buy about 10 or 20 or whatever so you can change their clothes. Who cares what anybody thinks? They may think he's wearing the same shirt every day. He's not. Next slide, please. I've talked about people who are living, but I want to talk about a couple of people who are not with us anymore. So I want to talk about Benjamin Banneker. So I am just going to be honest, growing up here in the US, I only heard of Benjamin Banneker during Black History Month, and then I never heard of him again. And then the next year it'd be him along with Martin Luther King and a couple other people. It's like these people, George Washington Carver, they're like these people whose names you see in their poster and then they disappear for the other 11 months of the year. So, but I started as an adult researching some things about Benjamin Banneker. And though he lived at a time when they did not have what they called a formal autism diagnosis. Back then, I told you, it was considered part of schizophrenia. A lot of the traits that I see in Benjamin Banneker, if he was not autistic, he certainly was somewhere close. So I'm just going to share some of the notes that I have. He was known to fixate on certain objects, such as a friend's watch. This often led to an experiment or invention of his own. He loved measurements and boundaries. So he was actually part of the team that surveyed the original boundaries of the District of Columbia. And he made his own astronomical calculations. He loved to do things. He loved to predict eclipses and planetary conjunctions and all these things. And so there were almanacs. So this is an African-American man living in the 1700s, right? People are slaves. Like he was a free man, but it's not like it was exactly the most open-minded, racially diverse environment. So he was hired to help to this amazing job to help measure the boundaries. And he told the white supervisor, that I need to be done by X day because I have to go here to measure this because of his whole thing with his almanac, which again was just a personal hobby. And his boss is looking at him like, huh? But the guy did it. And so he created the first of a 6-year series of almanacs. They were in 1792. They printed in 7 different cities in 5 different states. He also wrote a letter to Thomas Jefferson, who wasn't the president yet at the time. I think he was Secretary of State. But he felt that Jefferson was being a hypocrite because he had supported the French Revolution and all of this kind of stuff. But he felt like you're a Secretary of State in a country that has slavery. How could this be the case? Kind of like how Greta didn't understand how people are living their happy lives and destroying the environment. He wrote a letter that is still part of Thomas Jefferson's estate. And let me read this letter, a portion of it. He basically accused Jefferson of being a criminal and a fraud. He said, "Sir, how pitiable it is to reflect on you. You were so fully convinced of the benevolence of the Father of mankind and of his equal and impartial distribution of rights and privileges that he had conferred upon them. But at the same time, you counteract his mercies, detaining by fraud and violence such a numerous amount of my brethren under groaning captivity and cruel oppression. You at the same time are found most guilty of a criminal act that you professedly detested with regard to yourself." Now that probably could have got him beheaded, but Jefferson admired the guy's guts. And so anyway, I have some information here about Paul Dirac, who is an amazing, but I'm going to skip ahead because we're almost out of time. I want to go to the next slide. Quickly, I've talked a little bit about how this has helped me, and working as a professor, I use the things that I'm interested in and passionate about I bring them to the classroom. And I think about my students and I incorporate that. So for example, there's a syllabus statement in the beginning. So when I'm reading it and I'm talking about it, I tell them, this is your tax dollars. These are your parents' tax dollars. If you all need these accommodations, you're entitled to them. There is nothing to be ashamed of. It is personal between you and your professor, but you get them in place. And if you don't need them, don't use them. But do go through the process. Why wouldn't you? Why shouldn't you? You vote. Why, do the things that you're entitled to do. And and so I also allow them multiple ways to turn in assignments. I know this can't work for every class, for every type of class, but I had a student who was really dyslexic, and basically he turned in all his assignments to me one semester orally. He would make appointments, with me, and he would come in if we had like a reflection paper or what have you, or we had to test or a quiz. I'd give it to him. He could answer it. It's just that the paper would slow him down and trip him up, and then he'd get anxious and so forth. So I would use that as an opportunity. I'd quiz him and I'd get his answers, and then I'd mark it, and he would do the same thing with reflection, and then I found that we had some tools that only belonged to disability studies that could have been beneficial for all students and for employees, because it's not like all people are different. We all process differently. We all have different strengths and weaknesses and preferences with learning. So I was all professors have to be on certain, institutional committees. So I joined one that was piloting. We were switching from one form of text to speech to another. And I was part of a team, and I said, why, instead of just paying for this, because there's a certain amount of licenses that you're given per institution, instead of paying for this per use, why don't we get this for everyone? Because it ends up being cheaper when you buy it in bulk. And they were like, well, everybody doesn't need it. I said, yeah, but everyone can use it. Let's sell it as something that can be beneficial for like multitasking. A lot of professors are parents. Now you can have the voice of the thing going while you're changing diapers or ironing, or you're driving home. Let's talk about people who can see it and read it at the same time. Let's talk about the time that you're going to save, because now you don't have to, if your student needs accommodations, you don't have to book time to read. This thing can read it aloud to them, and you've got the virtual proctor. And all this kind of stuff. So we also put it as part of our our end of course survey. So you can offer something to the public. So we had this big rollout. We got the marketing team to make these pretty little images. We had this big rollout on social media, and we gave some stuff away, and we had some people talking about how it helps them to use this tool and all this kind of stuff. And we had videos, how to use it. And we had infographics that we made and all this stuff. But we wanted to get the buy-in. So we were like, okay, it's the students might use it. How are we going to make sure the staff are using it, and the professors? So we put it as part of our end of course survey, that it's one of the things that they answer. So they're asking about, if the professor is accessible and available, and all these different questions about lab. And they're asking about, have you been introduced to this tool? Do you know how to use it? Do you use it, and why? And so now everyone had a vested interest in at least sharing it with the students, maybe pulling it up on the screen, demonstrating how to use it, something, so that students could at least be aware of it, even if they didn't need it. And so that's one of the things. And then there's other things that I do. I can be on, and I can people, and then I can't, right? So I schedule my things in a certain way, my day in a certain way, to where I'll have like a couple of classes back to back. And then I've got some time for grading or whatever. And then maybe I'll have my office hours on a different day, spread apart, because it'll be too much for me to have it like right after teaching. Maybe I just can't deal with people. I encourage my students to use, messaging. So even before the pandemic, to use virtual tools to reach out to me and so forth. And so I use a lot of things, and I have sensory, issues of my own. So in my classroom, the fluorescent lights are usually not on. I pull up my blinds, and we have the sunlight. We might have class outside sometimes if we need to, like my students understand. And if it's a rainy day and I have to use the fluorescent lights, I've got my sunglasses in the desk. I've got my stimming devices. They know not to put anything in my hand. I said, if you want a grade, don't give it to me. I've got ADHD. I'm going to lose it. I have a basket where they turn things in if they're not turning things in person. So I accommodate myself, and I'm using the strength that I had. I bring them to the classroom, and I'm not afraid to say I'm wrong. If someone suggests something that seems like better than what I do, I'll bring that in. These are all tools that have helped me be successful. But enough about me. Let's on the next slide, please. I just want to talk about. I'm sorry, I said enough about me, but I'm about to talk about me again real quick. But then I'm going to talk about some other people. But I'm doing so for a reason, to tie things together, because we're near the very end. So I don't know if some of you are noticing, I'm wearing a Dragon Ball Z, a six-star ball, because I love these things. So I love Steven Universe. I love Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball Super. I love Marvel. I'm just a big nerd. I love the Ober Newton Chronicles. I love, Hogwarts stuff. And I like these things. And when I was a kid, I played with dolls probably till about high school, because see, my dolls had storylines. It wasn't about, oh, I dressed her up. They might wear the same clothes for weeks. I mean, I ever changed their hair started getting naughty because I didn't comb it, but they had cool things that they were doing in their lives and so on. And so there was a time where if something was not, or Disney movies, a lot of people complain they got to take their kids to Disney and Pixar movies. I actually enjoy the movies. So my kids are still young enough to where my younger ones, they still want to watch it, but I still watch them. So I found that there's a way that you're supposed to be in society, and I'm not going to be that way. So I find clothing that look business professional, but they're comfortable, right? They don't have tags and they have weird things. Same thing with makeup. I think people, whether you're on the spectrum or not, can you find ways to be comfortable and bring what you love into your life? You'll do better. You know what I mean? If you study better with music, put some music on. If exercise, find a way to do these things. Don't let the world tell you that it's inappropriate, it's childish, it's this, it's that. Does it bring you joy? Does it bring your child joy? Then that's all that matters. If it's not hurting anyone, lean into it and be surprised how it will help rise things up in other areas and scaffold you into things that you might have never thought you could do. Next slide, please. So some other things that I love, because we're almost out of time. Like I said, I love Marvel. I love the Oprah Newton Chronicles. I love The Expanse, the books, actually. I've only watched 1 or 2 of the episodes. I love Battlestar Galactica, just into stuff. I have my things. There was one year that my thing was House MD episodes. I had to watch them all, obsessively. Another year was Nip Tuck, and Big Love. So it's whatever it is, we have our things, our passions, our special interests. Just let us do what we do. I eat the same foods every single day. This is one of them. Cheese whiz. We order them from Amazon. But it makes me happy. And having people involved in and respecting what makes me happy helps me. Next slide, please. So we're nearly the end. Cornel West says that justice is what love looks like in public. I want to venture to tell you that acceptance is what love looks like, on the individual basis. Tolerance is fine. Tolerate something, but that just means that's just the bare minimum. Okay, it's all right. I won't rebel. Wouldn't it be great if we could move from tolerance to acceptance? You don't have to be really into something, but if you could try to accept it, even if you're not necessarily embracing it, it's so freeing. And so next slide, please. So I want to think about some of the ways that we can do this with one another. Success looks different to other people, right? So when you are shoveling, if those of you, if you've ever lived in a place with cold temperature like I have, you don't just shovel your little part of the sidewalk. No, you shovel the whole way down. Usually you'll shovel part of your neighbors and they'll shovel part of yours. You don't just do what benefits you. You do what's beneficial in general, even though it's a lot of work, even though it's not always fun, right? You're out there shoveling, or you're washing the car, or you're doing certain things that you may not be crazy about, but you like the results, which are someone being able to walk comfortably without falling, or your car looking neat, or your family having a meal to eat, right? So every moment of this thing might not be enjoyable, but can you change yourself? Can you challenge yourself? Can you push yourself to do something outside of your comfort zone that will bring joy to another individual? Next slide, please. So we're going to take some questions in a minute. And this is the time where I would ask if you could share some ways that you've done this, that you've challenged yourself to connect to someone else. But we'll kind of handle that in the next segment. So next slide, please. So success is different, right? People think it's this linear thing, just like development. It's really all topsy-turvy and weird, just like the autism. It's not just this linear spectrum. Yes, all people are different, but it's kind of like strength here, weakness here, strength here, and so on. And so I want you to venture to connection, or a successful, happy life. Doesn't have to look the way people think it needs to look. There's certain things I will never do, but I'm still very much an adult. Who cares? Think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and self-actualization. And what does that look like for your child? What does that look like for you? And that's the success you want to chase. Next, please. Strengthening us individually strengthens all of us. And so there is a book that I've recently edited with some colleagues. It's called Sincerely Your Autistic Child. And in this book, it has the voices. It's 28 chapters from autistic contributors. And there's a forward and a conclusion by non-autistic parents who wrote in it as well, sharing their experiences. A lot of times there's this divide. Autism parents here, autistic adults here. We don't need a divide. We need to come together. We're a family. These kids need us and we need each other. So we can share, you know your child best. You're there every day. You know what their favorite color is and what they like to eat and what they do. You are a part of their voice, and we are a part of their voice because we know what it's like to be an autistic child. So together, if we can, together, we can do that. We can help each other. You know what I mean? We can, fill those gaps and help them have a better life. I also wanted to share some other resources. CARD has an e-library. There's so many other sources they have. And then there's this amazing, La Hora de Cafecito, which is a bilingual show that's held once a week on Facebook Live with a lot of great discussion and guest speakers. And so I wanted to share that with you. Next slide, please. Strengthening us individually strengthens us all collectively, right? So a band doesn't have everybody playing the same exact instrument. That's boring, right? You have your drummer, and then you have your trombones and your saxophone, and you have your drum major, and I don't really know what they're called. I've never been in a band, sorry. But you have all these different instruments, or an orchestra, right? You have them playing different things, and that's what makes it beautiful. It's boring to just have one, unless you're going for a solo, but that's not a band, right? So we want the same. Let us have these interests. Let us spice up your life, and see how that you blossom as a result. Next slide, please. And when that happens, when you embrace the strengths and the uniqueness of each person, you will soar. Just like the Z fighters, they're all different. Some have the ability. Some are aliens. Some are humans. Some can do this thing. Some can do that thing. Some are older. Some are younger. But together, this one's teamwork, and this one's organization, and this one's brawn, and this one's brain. They save the earth over and over and over again. Can you save your earth, your little one's earth, and this earth that we all live in by leaning in and seeing these obsessions as opportunities? The last slide is probably just contact information. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Dr. Onaiwu. That was fantastic and so richly informative. I'm still going to be vibrating with some of those thoughts far beyond this discussion. We will be recording this so people will be able to see it again. What we'd like to do at this point is to listen to our participants, if we can get the question slides. But first, we'd like to give you a round of applause. So, Christine, sorry, Ellie, can we get the question slides or? So we would like to hear your stories of opportunities and challenges that have occurred to you based on Dr. Onaiwu's presentation. You can use the chat, you can use the Q&A for questions, and if you raise your hand, which is at the bottom of the screen, the little hand, we can make your mics live for sharing. We have people moderating who will be calling out some names.
While they are waiting to decide if they want to ask a question or not, we do have two questions that we obtained during the presentation. The first question states, I am a 31-year-old woman from the Tampa Bay area, and I'm having trouble finding a place that works with the diagnosis, that works with and diagnoses adults with autism and that my insurance accepts. She met with one psychologist, but she did not give much consideration to any autism evaluation. Are there tips for getting a diagnosis as a woman who thinks she is autistic?
So I'm sure that the CARD staff can share some things. I just want to share my layperson's perspective, because I had a similar situation, because it was actually my children's providers were the ones who were like, Morénike, you need to go get checked out. Because I was like, oh, you think I'm on the spectrum? And they were like, mm-hmm. But like it is, as you mentioned, it's a lot more difficult finding people who feel comfortable diagnosing adults. And then if you mask or what have you, or if you've had any kind of element of success, they think that you surely can't be autistic. There's a lot of these, really inaccurate, biases. And so one thing that I did is, and I also had difficulty finding one that would take my insurance. So I got on waiting list. There were two individuals that I saw. I had to pay, which unfortunately, so I had to save up and pay out of pocket for them. And so for the first one, I went in and I was evaluated and all this kind of stuff. By the time I went to the second one, because they were two, I just wanted more than one opinion. I had gone in and I had read the DSM-4 and DSM-5, and I'd taken a lot of notes and information about these different things, and because how they're expecting something to look can look a certain way. Like they're talking about if a person's stimming. Well, I had learned, now I don't suppress myself. And so I don't even realize, I'm probably stimming now for all I know. But when I was growing up, your teachers tell you, stop that, don't do this, don't do that. So I had learned to be still and stim in my head quietly where nobody can know. So I had things running through my head. I'd learned to make eye contact. I couldn't pay as much attention to what the people were saying. I might as well have been speaking Greek, but I could look at you and pretend like I was paying attention, whereas I can pay a lot more attention looking outside. So I had started to kind of make notes about how these things appear, because someone might be like, please, you have a family, you drive, you travel, you this, you that, without thinking about the fact that, yeah, my family knows as soon as I get in the door and close it, and don't, if phone answers, I don't want to talk. Anybody rings a bell, I'm not going to talk to them. I like, they understand that I build in all this compensatory stuff to survive. And so there was a person named Maxfield Sparrow, and they wrote a book, and they also have a blog that has a lot of tips. I think it's called the A to Z of Autism, but a lot of tips and information about adult diagnoses. There is a website, autistic.com. It is, and I'm going to put it in the chat. It's either Autistic or We Are Autistic, but it's solely for adults. And so it's a really good tool. Diane Wright from Canada is a woman of color actually who founded it, and has a lot of really good information, reading lists, tips about finding out, resources and possible ways of getting diagnosed. There's a social media community that's fairly large where we can get a lot of suggestions and help. There's also another person, I think it's Cynthia Kim, who wrote a book. I believe it's called I Think I Might Be Autistic, and also has some suggestions of how people can, and even some scripts, I believe, how people can communicate with their providers. So I would just want to throw those out to you, but I wanted to make sure there's time in case someone else has some other resources, especially something that might be in the local area that could be helpful for you.
Thank you. We have another question, and we're getting lots of comments, and I'll read a couple of those after this question. Anastasia wants to know, can an autism diagnosis as an adult make life harder as a mother? I fear it being used against me.
Anastasia, I hate to tell you, you're right. I really hate to tell you, but I'm just going to be honest. So I didn't know this at first. And so when I first found out, it was such a relief to me. Like, so I think about how people sometimes talk about crying when they find out about their child's diagnosis. I didn't, because I was like, okay, good. Now we know what to do, But I cried, not in the doctor's office, but I cried when I got my own, because I thought about all those times that I hated myself. Why can't I do this? Why is this so easy for everybody? Why is that so easy for everybody? I finally had an answer. I finally had some clarity. I finally knew that I wasn't broken and weird, and I was just different. And I was so excited that I went all over the place on social media, blogs, this, that, everywhere. Autism was all over the place. Like, it was like, it's like sometimes like when someone first comes out for the first time and they're like, there's rainbows everywhere. Like, later on they calm down, but it's like new and fun and cool and invigorating. And so I did not realize that this is a very ableist world that we live in. And I didn't realize that people don't always see that as a positive thing. I also didn't realize autism, again, it's autism, but it falls within disabilities. So just people with disabilities in general, whether they're physical disabilities, sensory, developmental, whether they're hidden or obvious, people with disabilities are still very much discriminated against in this country. In fact, there's 10 states where, in the absence of any neglect or abuse, a non-disabled parent has preference in terms of custody than the disabled parent. So say it's a husband and wife getting a divorce or what have you. They both want, they both love their kids. They may, consider the non-disabled parent, even though the other one is just as good of a parent, for that reason. And there's a lot of data and statistics on disability being used negatively against people. And so while it's very empowering to know who you are, I'm not going to pretend like there isn't still discrimination in the workplace, socially and legally. In fact, there's a very sad story and a true story. I'm an adoptive and a biological parent. And I was told when I was, a teenager that I wouldn't be able to conceive children. So I adopted, and then I ended up actually having a couple of surprise babies. So I have a family of both. And My family was selected as literally by our agency, the adoptive family of the year. They have an annual gala. It's a huge deal. They raise all kinds of money and they have all these big wigs who come in, celebrities, and you're at this like super expensive hotel that I couldn't even ever afford to go to if not for the fact that I was the guest of honor. Literally, my family was the family of the year. The next year, we were fighting for custody of our children because in that next year, I had publicly come out as being autistic. And I'm the exact same mom, exact same person with the exact same children. But now I don't have the capacity to deal with children with such high needs because of my own deficits. And it was just horrible, a horrible experience for us all, very traumatizing, very expensive, very challenging. And I've known other people who've had discrimination at work, even though they're not supposed to. Yes, there's ways that people find ways around, doing so. And so it can be hard. And so while I respect whatever a person has to do in their own life, like there's some people who have to mask, like there's people who have accents. Like I think about one of my colleagues, Spanish is her first language and she speaks a certain way at work and then speaks another way at home because she just doesn't want the drama and people act like oh, if you have an accent, you must not speak English. How are you? Like even though you can speak English just fine, just because you have an accent. And so that's a choice she makes, not because she's ashamed of her culture, but just because she's just tired and she just wants to do what's easiest. So some people do need to be stealth. I would advise a person that I think getting the diagnosis can be helpful. I think self-diagnosis can be helpful. I understand wanting to get an official one, but that is part of the reason why a lot of adults do self-diagnose and wait, to maybe pursue the other one because, unfortunately, we live in a very unfair world.
Yes. And people are asking or answering the question, we would like to hear your stories of opportunities and challenges based on Dr. Onaiwu's presentation. And one of the questions in the Q&A is, my personal obsession is writing and reading stories. And since you had experience writing books, I was wondering if you had writing advice.
Sure, I don't know if it's the greatest writing advice, but but I'm going to give it anyway. So I've always loved writing, reading and writing. And so one of the advice that I give is that don't throw anything away because you'll probably look at it and be like, this is dumb, or people aren't going to get this, or this is weird. So I jot notes on my phone in different places. I don't write them much on paper anymore. I do sometimes, but I tend to lose those. I keep the notes and I'll come back to them later. Something that you write, it's interesting. Actually, my dissertation is based on an idea that I'd had years prior, something I kind of wrote down a couple of sentences was, and it just stuck with me always. So I would just say that, we can be our own worst critic. And so, keep the things that you write and be free, express yourself and think about what you'd want to know or how you want things to be clear to people. And, and also continue reading because I think reading fuels us as writers as well. But I'm glad that you enjoy it. Keep it up. We just need, I don't know, reading, writing, those things just take us to a whole new world. It's just beautiful.
It's interesting that you say that, Morénike, because as a researcher and a faculty member, I tell my students all the time, don't throw any of the ideas away. If we cut it out of your paper, save it for something else. We also have Kimberly who said, my obsessions became the basis for my PhD. I'm now a controls engineer and roboticist.
And so if you all don't have any questions, feel free to share. I know some of you have typed some things in the chat. If you want to share what's something that you've done or, your family's done or that you're thinking of doing with an obsession, what's something that your kid is really into. Like my son is really into Kirby right now and Super Mario Brothers and stuff like that. And so that's something that, he draws it on his papers and stuff like that. So that's something we use for like examples and stuff like that. So we just love to hear from you all. And then, and then there'll be some other things as well.
And Anastasia said that she is obsessed with learning the human body, the brain, and she became a registered medical assistant.
If I can add to that, one of the places that I think that we can see that obsessions become mastery and in places to be leader are at things like Comic Cons and things like that, where if you know every single thing about Doctor Who, or you can name all the all the Marvel characters and their and know their backstories, you're going to find people that truly admire that, and those tend to be very kind of open and sort of welcoming communities that value diversity.
Absolutely. I would recommend people. I know some people are like, I want my child to have friends. There's nothing wrong with having friends, but friends can be a lot of work and they can be draining. So the internet, like as I know we right now, it's difficult to go to some of these in-person cons and whatnot. Or I know for sometimes for some people it might be hard, the environment because it can be loud and big. But sometimes you can kind of get past that because it's cool to cosplay and all of that. But there's so many online like fandoms and places where people are going to love you delving into whatever that thing is and going all on and on and on about it. There's bullies in those places too, but I'd encourage people, that's also another place to really find community. And so it's just as real as anything else. I know people think that it's online, it's not real. No, it can be very real. Connection is a connection, whether it's someone who's next door to you or someone who's across the world.
And Kimberly states that it's especially nice because building machines, especially bots, is great stimming. And she also stated that they're starting to introduce quiet spaces to the con, slowly but surely. And Anastasia says, I took courses for parenting through St. Petersburg College, anthropology, extra courses unnecessary to my degree, but I wanted to understand. I sought more help with co-parenting through infant mental health when I needed it, learning baby sign language and baby sign to communicate with my son. And Kimberly stated that the San Diego Comic-Con was overwhelming. And we have another comment that says, my brother's obsessed with Halloween, scary monsters, but he has a lot of sensory issues, and going to Busch Gardens Hollow Screen gave him an opportunity to practice being in difficult sensory situations because of his interest.
And that's actually a great segue. Thank you, everyone, for your input and for your responses, Morénike. We're going to actually shift a little bit to asking people about their experience with CARD and the Learning Academy. And some of the work that we do is to help make some of those spaces more autism friendly. So before the next question, we would like to share a brief video about CARD, and then I will give a description of TLA, and then we'll have another question.
CARD USF provides free coaching, training, guidance, and assistance to increase knowledge and make life better for people on the autism spectrum across their lifespan. We connect families and professionals to services and resources. As a community program, we serve people in all areas where they live, learn, work, and play. How can we help? CARD can provide information about an individual's disability, refer families to federal, state, and local service agencies, help families find support groups, support families in planning for the future, and provide training sessions on how to work effectively with individuals on the autism spectrum. CARD USF serves the 14 counties around the Tampa Bay area, spanning from Pasco and Polk all the way down to Hendry, Collier, and Lee counties. CARD serves individuals of any age with autism spectrum disorder. We also serve individuals with related disabilities such as vision and hearing impaired. Our work focuses on providing communities, organizations, agencies, service providers, and families with the knowledge and skills to support children and adults in early intervention, school, community, work, and home settings. In our work, we address issues that impact individuals across their lifespan. We develop and disseminate materials. We develop and distribute online newsletters twice a year and have a monthly card connector for our mailing list. We organize and conduct local, regional, and statewide training events. We maintain an active website, and we engage in individual consultations. CARD is here as your source of information for questions about autism spectrum disorders. The level of service you receive depends upon your need. Often, a phone consultation will be all that is needed to solve an ASD related problem that your family may be experiencing, or to answer a question you may have. Our CARD consultants provide direct assistance to families, schools, and agencies by providing specific strategies and resources to meet an individual's needs. It can include any or all of the following: telephone and email contact, as well as home visits, community visits, meeting attendance, dissemination of research materials, connection with families and community resources, and assisting people to implement ideas learned during trainings. We provide technical assistance. It is a service provided by CARD to schools and agencies which have direct interaction with people on the autism spectrum. The focus of technical assistance is on building capacity with a teacher or a team around an entire classroom issue or a concern. Technical assistance does not focus on an individual student. CARD can provide technical assistance to employers, businesses, and other organizations as well. CARD USF provides a variety of trainings to schools, agencies, parent support groups, and businesses. At CARD, we've gathered information about local and regional resources that can be useful to parents and professionals. Resources and materials can be accessed online in our resource section or by contacting CARD USF. We collaborate with community partners in hosting public awareness events to enhance education about autism spectrum disorder. CARD is committed to helping individuals become valued and productive citizens. As individuals with autism move from their school years to adulthood, there are lots of services and systems and supports that need to be considered in order to make sure that individual is going to have an ongoing quality of life. Topics such as transition from school to the world of work or college, lifestyle planning, social security benefits, and use of work incentives, and preparation for independent living are just a few of the areas that we address with our constituents at CARD. Our vision for adults with ASD is for them to have the same opportunities in life that are available to all citizens. These opportunities include being as independent as possible, having a safe place to live, holding a job that suits their capacities and interests, having a social life that includes real friends, making important choices in their life, and being supported to fulfill their potential as contributing members of society. For more information about CARD or our services, please visit our website or call 813-974-2532.
Thank you. That was the magnificent Lee Daly narrating 5 minutes of card. And Christine has put some of our web links in the chat. I'd also like to talk really briefly about the Learning Academy, a related program to CARD. We provide two things through the Learning Academy. One is a 30-week transition program for young adults on the autism spectrum that focuses on individualized learning, discovery, skills identification and building, assessing people's interest and readiness for employment or further education, and self exploration. It's really a transformative year. And it goes along the semesters, like the school system. So fall and spring semester, we're about to graduate another amazing class. And then we also have the Learning Academy provides the full array of employment services that are primarily funded through the vocational rehabilitation program. And we do discovery, we do job coaching, we do supportive employment, on the job training, and really much more with an amazing dedicated staff. So what we'd like to do at this point is to ask you about your experience with CARD, or with TLA, and tell us some about what we are doing well. If you have positive experiences to share, please do that in the chat, or in the Q&A. We will move on to telling us what you need, but we'd like to elicit some stories that you have about perhaps a way that you've connected with CARD and TLA and benefited from that. Dr. Onaiwu mentioned that vocational rehabilitation might be helpful for the young man whose mother posted a question. And the question is, I believe, my son wants to go into a field where he can help other neurodiverse people and those who have been bullied. However, he's has trouble with retention of school subjects. I worry that he'll have trouble in college. Any advice? He's starting high school in the fall. Um, in fact, a voc rehab, I'm not sure a voc rehab referral can happen that early, but I'll tell you who does know. Our program assistant director at TLA, Christine Hugh, is available. Um, so she might be able to answer uh, that question. Christine, are you around? I see her. Yes. Okay. Voc rehab can start at age 13. So that's good advice. I see a hand raised. Uh, Tosha Littles, do you have a comment, a question or a comment?
Yes, the question was, um, would I like to talk about my experience with CARD and what you're doing well? And I would love to. I've had a wonderful CARD consultant for about 7 years, Miss Elizabeth Burke, and she's just been so awesome. Even if she's gone to presentations, she'll send out an email that says, hey, I was thinking about this might be applicable to your child, or this might be good for your child, or I just, CARD has just always been a light at the end of the tunnel, and has been so supportive with me and my son throughout our journey. So that's what you're doing very well.
Thank you, Miss Tosha. Would anyone else like to share? And I agree with you and Lee Daly that Liz is amazing. Okay. So apparently, Voc Rehab pre-employment transition services can start at age 14. If anyone else would like to speak, please raise your hand, or you can put something in the chat. And if not, we can move on, but we will wait just another moment in case people are formulating their thoughts. Okay, I think I'll move on. And if anybody has thoughts as we go along, you can still pop them in the chat. Again, we thank you for sharing with us. We at CARD and TLA are always looking to better connect with and support our constituents through our referral process, through community outreach, special programs like the Autism Friendly Business Initiative, our safety programs, and our mental health programs. We in 2020, we really ramped up and focused our efforts on diversity and inclusion, starting within our organizations and their internal processes. We've had strategic planning meetings with Dr. Onaiwu in January and February, with about 25 of our staff and board members present each time. Within these sessions, we openly and honestly discussed ideas about diversity, bias, and inclusion, leading to specific action steps which are ongoing. Dr. Onaiwu guided us to create action steps for each of the 4 CARD diversity work groups, which include staff and board members, including individuals with autism and their family members. Our Access work group focuses on strategies for reaching families and communities that we have not robustly connected with over time. Our promotions work group are busy reviewing our materials, presentations, and websites in order to increase diversity and accessibility of those outreach methods. Tonight's presentation and our disparities work group is digging into the research on health and other disparities based on neurodiversity and other intersectionalities such as race, ethnicity, language of origin, and economic status. And our accountability group keeps us all on track for our goals and progress. Tonight's presentation and listening tour is the culmination of our work with Dr. Onaiwu, and we are deeply grateful. Okay, so our third question is how can we better support you? What services and supports are needed?
Lisa Bryce has a comment.
Oh, okay. Lisa, please go ahead.
Got it. I think I unmuted.
We can hear you, Lisa.
Perfect. I do want to, you went into the diversity. I think you guys have been doing a great job at trying to move and increase as diversity Spanish, as you guys see needs of, and opening up as a board member, but trying to open up further and trying to talk to the TLA graduates and build what's actually needed as time of change. Because I think you've seen constituents go from young people all the way into adulthood, and so I think CARD has done a great job at that. I do see a need to really help, and it builds on their interest. But it's trying to get that support group of trying to find an activity or trying to find something that can just lead them into something better, to find, oh, I do like Comic-Con, or I do like something that feels safe. Because I think that it's hard enough for the neurotypical, and it's just even more anxiety or more provoking for the young adult. And I think as a parent, you sometimes don't realize you're pushing them to a direction that the parent wants versus what that child, a young adult wants, that the hopes and dreams of this is going on.
There's a lot to know about what you're saying right there. It is fine, as Dr. Onaiwu mentioned, finding that connection is important for everybody. But you're right that even for neurotypical kids, it can be complicated finding those connections and to do it safely. So we hear you, and we do try to highlight some of those groups that are happening in our area, but certainly we are always looking towards. Right now, we are looking towards increasing what we put out there for transition age and adults, because the population of folks that are being diagnosed with autism are now growing up, and we don't just serve children. So absolutely, that's a focus. Thank you for that. Someone else?
I want to jump in and just encourage everyone. I know this is going to sound really weird, but I'm going to say it anyway. Is that when in the time that I've been meeting with the board members and the staff, and we were, kind of looking at different things, and there was one activity where we were, looking at various needs, and there are obviously certain things that are beyond the scope of any organization, and we, and CARD is cognizant of that, but if there are some things that, even if they seem weird, pie in the sky type stuff, I think I would really encourage you to mention that anyway, because I think that it is something that, like CARD is, increasing their partnerships, and their, ability to give referrals and what have you. And there are some really generous donors in the community that believe in what CARD is doing. And so you'd be surprised, possibly, even if it's not something that could be, offered right away, it could be food for thought for future programs, for future endeavors. There's a lot of things that, we talked about intersectionality, and so there's a lot of things that feed into one another, and that are beneficial for a family, and an individual, that the person's on the spectrum, but it doesn't mean that there's still other needs from an external aspect that could be beneficial. So we talked about some of the cultural things, for example, or education, but there's lots of different things. I think about how some years ago, a lot of the reasons that there are more sensory friendly, like sensory movie nights and museums, are because parents spoke up and said, look, my kid can't go to the museum or movies. I'm tired of getting kicked out. We need to have a day to go. And and it eventually people started to hear. So it took some years, but making those, those little seeds of planting, it'd be great if there was this, or it'd be great if there was more of this, would be something that I think that they'd really like to hear, even if they don't have a solution for it right at this moment.
Absolutely. I'm just trying to read through the chat here. We do have one person on the phone who we can't see in the chat. If you have a question or a comment from us, if you hit *6, that would unmute you and you would have an opportunity to speak. Just wanted you to have that opportunity. Bob says have more groups, social groups online with breakout rooms. So that's one of the things that we're doing at the Learning Academy is we're working with our students, during their time with us and using a lot of breakout rooms, not just for to do small group work together, but to do some socializing. And that technology that we had to learn to use during quarantine has really become a beneficial to us in trying to expand additional opportunities. So Kimberly said, how do we find more options for adults on the spectrum? I feel like I'm always learning about myself in this light. So certainly our Facebook page, we offer a number of options as we hear about them. We do have an adult group on Facebook as well. And Anastasia asked what the Facebook group is. So we will make that information available to you. Look at, oh, there we go. That's the Facebook page. And actually, we have an adult group through the CARD Facebook page at CARD USF, and then you can select the adult group.
And maybe I can even give permission to Ema to speak a little bit about the things she's doing once a month. Once I find your name here, Ema.
Sure, I'd love for Ema to share.
All right, there we go.
Hi, can you hear me?
Mhm.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, so I am also someone who is living with a disability. I was born with spina bifida, and I also, when I was younger, wanted to be an actress, but because I never saw anyone with spina bifida or any other disability for that matter, and if there was a character with a disability, it was played by an able actor or actress. So I had the idea of kind of sifting through films once a month. Each month we pick a film, and the next one will be on May 15th, and it's going to be Mary and Max, and just to see how we feel as people with disabilities. Are we okay with the way we're being portrayed in the media? Are we not okay? Will we change? Will we not change? So all are welcomed, but that's what's happening once a month.
And that was Ema's idea, and it's pretty exciting to be able to have that open forum. Um, so that will be ongoing. Other thoughts about services and supports that are needed? Services, supports, or anything else, frankly. Well, we just want you guys to know that we're always listening. We really are open to feedback, and we really are dedicated to adding things and pivoting and sort of bringing ideas together as we get them. Um, so if you're not wanting to speak out, during this. Uh, in this forum, we really encourage you to get in touch with us in any of the ways that we've shown, our Facebook page or our website, and speak with us about your needs, and we'll certainly do the best that we can to provide resources, if not providing some of those things directly. So Kimberly says she wishes she had the option to avoid fluorescent lights at the engineering complex at USF. Um, Absolutely. The first thing I did when I got into my office and when I started this job last year was bring lamps in and turn those overheads off. It's tough. Have put a link in the chat box to complete our survey, our training evaluation. We always do want to know how we're doing and ideas for going forward. As you can see on our screen, you are welcome to join our e-library, which was established a year ago, and the quarantine has actually given us an opportunity to really focus on pushing out some resources virtually instead of having a room that you have to go to at USF to look at books and things like that. Um, so we want to thank you very much for sharing your stories and thoughts with us. As I said, please be sure that we're always listening. Dr. Onaiwu, Morénike, you've become a colleague and a part of the CARD family, and we appreciate you so much. And we'd like to take this opportunity to congratulate one of our attendees, Melissa McCall, who by random pick has won a copy of Morénike's book, Sincerely Your Autistic Child: What People on the Autism Spectrum Wish Their Parents Knew About Growing Up, Acceptance, and Identity. So a round of applause for Melissa. And for those who didn't win, we do have a copy of the book in our e-library. I'm just going to scan through and see if there are any last comments. Hey, Renike, do you have a closing thought or two before we round out the evening?
Yes, I really wanted to thank everyone for being present. First of all, thank you for, spending your evening with us, and for listening and for sharing your perspectives about things that are going well, things that could be improved, and just sharing resources with one another. That's really what's necessary. This person knows this and this person knows that, and that's kind of how we build community. And I'd like to encourage you all. I know that there's been a lot of very challenging, the last couple of years, the pandemic and then other things in general, things going on in the media and with society at large that have just been really challenging and draining and difficult for everyone. So I just want to just encourage everyone to give yourself a little grace and a little space. You're going to have some bad days. You're going to have some days that you're not all the way on your game, and that's probably going to be the same for, in your work life, in your home life, and so on. And just allow it. It's a moment, of your life. And so I just hope that people don't utilize those times of shortcoming or struggle to be a snapshot into what their life is going to be, or what their life, is like. And I just want to thank you for caring about this topic and caring about, the autistic community and disability communities, and just, you all have just really encouraged me, just what you've shared today, and your love for your children, and, and just your openness. And so thank you. Please keep working with CARD, share the information with others, and check out that e-library. They've got some great books, all kinds of books, like, a really good, repository of things. And a lot of you are still at home, so that book, would be a nice thing to read.
And we are always looking to add titles to the library as time goes on. So we take those suggestions as well. So thank you for those closing comments. Dr. Onaiwu, we are so honored to have you working with us, and also, to have this open event so that people can come and learn from you, and we can learn from them as well. Please do click the survey link in the chat to give us some feedback about this and future events. We do wish you well. We hope that you're all safe and well. And we would like you to have a great evening. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Morénike. I don't know how many times I just smiled from your vignettes and just what
Thank you.
share. It's just amazing.
Yes, this was amazing.
Thank you. I'm
And
just
I'll
really
be
glad that we were able to have it. And thank you all for making the time, and then also I also, I don't think I got to formally thank, Kayla and I really enjoyed coming on Cafecito. That was really a great discussion that we had as well with